He sacrifices the rook!
Chess is the best designed game of all time. In fact, it has a better design than all modern games. One of the biggest reasons for that is that chess never really makes you feel cheated. A lot of games try to manufacture tension by adding chance. In Monopoly, what determines whether you win or lose is luck. You roll the dice, you land somewhere, and the game kind of happens to you. So often you might lose not because you played badly, but because you were unlucky. Losing is already frustrating, but if you lose and it wasn't really your fault, then you can't even learn from it. That never happens in chess. If you lose, there's no one else to blame but yourself. That is what makes chess so much more emotional than most games. A loss can feel devastating because the mistake points back at you. You missed the tactic, you misunderstood the position, you let the other player outplay you. And because the game is fair, those losses can stay with you. You remember the move where everything went wrong, you remember the person who keeps beating you, and eventually a narrative beyond the game emerges. You start to learn how the other person plays. Maybe they always attack too early, maybe they always trade pieces, maybe they always beat you in the endgame. And because the wins and losses feel earned, those games create a story outside the board. Two players can battle each other for years, and every game adds another layer to that story. That is very hard for other games to create, but chess does it naturally. But fairness by itself is not enough. There are other deterministic games. Tic-tac-toe has no luck, but it's not a great game because it's too simple. Once both players know the basic strategy, the game is basically over. It just becomes a draw over and over again. So the game can be fair and still be trivial. A great game also needs depth, and that's where chess is almost perfect. The rules are simple, but from that simple rule set, you get a game that people can spend their entire lives studying and still not master. And that depth reveals itself in layers. At first, chess can be understood almost entirely through material. A queen is worth more than a rook is worth more than a bishop, and so on. But the better you get, the more you realize material is only a part of the game. Then you start caring about king safety, then piece activity, then pawn structure, then even more complex ideas like sacrifices and so on. This is excellent design, because the rules stay the same, but your understanding of what matters keeps changing. So, if a game is too simple, it becomes boring, but if the game is too complicated, people never get into it. And chess finds that perfect balance. But depth can become a problem if the game gives you too much to manage. Chess avoids that by giving you one move at a time. That sounds like a small rule, but it changes everything. You cannot fix every problem at once. If you attack, you might leave something else undefended. If you defend, you might be giving up the initiative. So every move is not just a choice. It is also the rejection of every other move you could have played. That is what keeps chess focused. In games like Civilization, the early turns are usually simple. You have few units, few cities, and a few meaningful choices. But later in the game, your empire expands, and every turn can become a massive list of things to do. At that point, you're not playing a strategy game, you're just doing administrative work. Chess avoids that. No matter how complicated the position gets, you only get one move. You still have to think hard, but the thinking stays concentrated. You're not managing 100 small decisions, you're choosing the one decision that matters the most. And because of that, chess can stay intense all the way to the end. Even if both players only have a few pieces left, the game is not necessarily over, because one move can still change everything. And since chess is 1 versus 1, it makes it much easier to match people fairly. In a lot of modern multiplayer games, especially first-person shooters, it is much harder to make a whole match fair, because you need an entire lobby of people around the same skill level. The best they usually could do is balance the teams, but that still means that some players on a team might be much better than others, so the game can feel unfair. Sometimes you're crushing people, and sometimes you're dying over and over again. Chess avoids that because you only need one opponent. Oh, and by the way, chess was the first to come up with a skill rating system, ELO, so all the other games that have skill-based matchmaking are copycats, which once again demonstrates that chess is the best designed game. I don't know how to say this without sounding judgy, but different games stimulate the mind in different ways. On one extreme end, you have games that are almost pure reaction. Something like an aim trainer is the cleanest example. It's mostly about speed, instinct, and muscle memory. It tries to stimulate the more immediate limbic part of your brain. On the other extreme, you have games like Go or classical chess, where almost everything is judgment, planning, calculation, and long-term understanding. But most games are somewhere in between. I would argue it's much harder to make an interesting cognitive game than an interesting reaction game. Reaction games rely on panic, speed, surprise, and adrenaline. Those are very powerful emotions. They're not bad at all, but they're much easier to stimulate. A cognitive game, on the other hand, has to earn your attention in a very different way. It has to make thinking itself interesting, and that's what chess does. But if I'm being honest, preferring cognitive games over reaction games is a subjective preference on my part. But I think that makes the case for chess even stronger, because chess can move along the spectrum without becoming a different game. If you want to play a slower and more thoughtful game, you can play with a longer clock. And if you want more reaction, intensity, and stress, you can shorten the clock. A 1-minute game is much more instinctive than a classical game, which is much more analytical. But both are still chess. The clock doesn't feel like some awkward rule added on top. It becomes part of the game and strategy itself. A lot of games like Monopoly and Risk often take way too long, and as a result, artificial rules like whoever has the most stuff after 2 hours wins need to be added. And that makes it feel like the game didn't end, it just feels like the game stopped. But in chess, the clock itself is part of the agreement from the beginning. It's not interrupting the game, it is part of the game. So the time control changes the feel of chess without destroying it. But if two players are not close in skill, chess can adjust. The stronger player can be given a handicap, like starting with a piece missing, like a pawn, knight, or a rook, so the game becomes more balanced and more fun for both players. This is why chess can be played by so many people, which is another reason why chess is perfect. Almost everyone knows chess on some basic level. You can take two people from completely different parts of the world who don't even speak the same language, and there's still a decent chance they could sit down and play a game of chess. In that sense, chess is probably second only to rock, paper, scissors in how universal it is. But chess is not only culturally important because of that, it also has weight beyond the game itself. Since it has been played for something like 1500 years, depending on how you count it, it means that a lot of the most important people in history probably played chess, or at least knew of it. Even today, chess still shows up in movies, shows, books, and political language as a symbol for intelligence, strategy, war, and decision making. No one says geopolitics is like a round of Fortnite, because Fortnite might be popular, but it doesn't have that gravitas chess does. And that's why chess is perfect.